This is a restricted competition, soldier. Show me your authorization.
What the hell is this? Who gave a black woman permission to step onto my range? Rear Admiral James Crawford's voice exploded across the loudspeakers, cutting through the morning air so sharply that every conversation on the firing line stopped at once. More than 300 competitors, military veterans, active duty personnel, law enforcement officers, reporters and spectators turned toward registration lane 7. Standing there alone was a black woman wearing faded blue jeans, a grey t-shirt and worn combat boots. She carried a weathered rifle case in one hand and a folded registration packet in the other. There was nothing flashy about her. No medals decorated her chest. No tactical sponsors surrounded her. No teammates stood at her side. She looked like someone who had quietly driven across the country, without expecting anyone to notice. But everyone noticed now. The annual Coronado Long-Range Marksmanship Championship wasn't just another shooting competition. It was where America's most respected military marksmen, elite instructors, decorated veterans, tactical trainers, and law enforcement precision shooters gathered to test themselves against the very best. Every competitor on that field had spent years building a reputation. Everyone except her Crawford stepped away from the registration tent, his polished dress uniform gleaming beneath the California morning sun. His reputation was legendary. Former SEAL commander, highly decorated officer, two-time champion of the very competition he now directed. People listened whenever he spoke in this morning. Every eye followed him as he slowly approached the woman standing quietly at the table. He looked her up and down before letting out a laugh, loud enough for nearby cameras to capture. Did somebody lose their way to the visitor center? A wave of laughter rolled through the crowd. Several competitors exchanged amused smiles. Others simply watched the woman, never looked away. She calmly placed her registration papers on the table and waited. Crawford picked them up with exaggerated curiosity. Army, he read aloud. Another laugh escaped him. He looked directly at her. Tell me something. What's your rank, darling? Go ahead. Give everyone here something to laugh about. More laughter echoed across the range. Television cameras zoomed closer. Phones began recording. The woman answered with the same calm expression she had carried since arriving. Master Sergeant. Silence lasted less than a second before the crowd erupted again. Master Sergeant Crawford repeated, shaking his head. I've heard better jokes from recruits on their first day. He tossed the registration packet back toward her. The papers scattered across the concrete in front of her boots. Some people laughed louder. Others looked uncomfortable. One retired Marine, standing near the checkpoint, folded his arms without saying a word. A young sheriff's deputy quietly lowered the phone he had been using to record. An Army captain glanced toward Crawford, then toward the woman, as though something about the exchange didn't sit right. The woman bent down, gathered every page, carefully straightened the edges with both hands, and stood back up. She never argued. She never defended herself. She never asked anyone to stop. There was a quiet discipline in the way she moved, the kind that didn't need permission or applause. Crawford smirked. You planning to compete against America's best? Yes, sir. Without a team, yes, sir? Without a sponsor, yes, sir. You really think you belong here? For the first time, she looked directly into his eyes. I'll let my performance answer that. Her voice wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional. It carried the steady confidence of someone who understood that real respect is earned through actions, not arguments. The words lingered longer than anyone expected. Even some of the competitors who had laughed moments earlier found themselves watching her differently. A veteran state trooper standing near the safety barricade quietly nodded to himself. Years in uniform had taught him that confidence spoken softly often carried more weight than confidence shouted into a microphone. The range safety officers began preparing competitors for the opening relay. Law enforcement volunteers checked barricades. Military officials reviewed scorecards. Families settled into the bleachers. Television crews adjusted their cameras toward the firing line. What had started as public entertainment was quietly becoming something else. No one knew her story. No one knew why she had come. Most people assumed she was about to embarrass herself in front of the nation's finest shooters. Only one thing was certain. The loudest voice on the range believed he had already decided who she was. The quietest person standing there had no interest in proving him wrong with words. The crowd slowly drifted toward the firing line, but conversations about the woman in the grey t-shirt refused to die. Every few seconds, someone glanced in her direction, expecting to see frustration or embarrassment on her face. Instead, she quietly inspected the bolts on her rifle case. Before placing it beside her lane, with the same careful precision she used to straighten the papers, Admiral Crawford had thrown onto the ground. She neither sought sympathy nor demanded respect. That alone caught the attention of people who had spent their careers reading others. Captain Daniel Brooks, a veteran police sniper from the Los Angeles Police Department SWAT unit, watched from the guest competitor section. 23 years in law enforcement had taught him that confidence rarely arrived wearing expensive gear or speaking the loudest. The officers who remained calm under pressure were often the ones everyone depended on when lives were at stake. He folded his arms and quietly said to the deputy standing beside him, "That woman has seen something most of us never will." The deputy looked surprised. "What makes you think that?" Brooks never took his eyes off her. "She isn't reacting to humiliation. She's controlling it not far away." Several Navy competitors continued laughing among themselves. Master Sergeant one joked, "I've seen civilians pretending to be veterans before. She'll probably pack up after the first round." Another competitor laughed, "Maybe she'll ask for directions to the spectator seats." Their jokes spread through nearby groups, but not everyone joined in. Some veterans remained silent. Experience had taught them never to underestimate someone willing to stand alone. The woman carefully unlatched her rifle case. Inside rested a rifle that looked older than many of the competitors surrounding her. There were no custom engravings, no polished finishes, no sponsor logos. Every scratch across the stock looked earned instead of cosmetic. She gently ran a cloth across the scope. Checking the lenses without rushing, each movement was deliberate, measured, disciplined. It looked less like preparing equipment and more like greeting an old friend. A young sheriff's deputy, assigned to event security, noticed the careful routine and quietly approached Captain Brooks. "You think she can actually compete?" Brooks smiled faintly. "I've learned something after 20 years wearing this badge. What the professionals never try to impress you before the work begins." Across the range, television crews continued interviewing famous competitors. Expected to win the championship, nobody requested an interview with the quiet, black woman standing alone. She seemed perfectly comfortable with that. She filled out the final equipment inspection paperwork, without speaking, unless an official asked a direct question. "Rifle," she answered, "confirmed." "Optics confirmed." "Ammunition confirmed." Every response was short, respectful, professional. The inspection officer noticed her calm demeanor and quietly handed back the paperwork. "Good luck today." She offered a small smile. "Thank you, officer." Those two simple words earned more respect from the officer than any speech nearby. Admiral Crawford noticed the brief interaction. His expression hardened. He disliked seeing officials treating her like every other competitor. In his mind, she hadn't earned that privilege. He walked toward the officials' platform, speaking loudly enough for nearby cameras to hear. Some people mistake confidence for ability. Several spectators chuckled. But this championship has a way of exposing pretenders. His words echoed through the loudspeaker system. Again, the woman showed no reaction. Captain Brooks quietly shook his head. "She's not pretending." The deputy beside him frowned. "How can you be so sure?" Brooks watched her adjust the rifle sling by less than half an inch before locking it into place. "Because she's preparing while everyone else is performing." Those words stayed with the deputy around the country. Thousands of viewers watching the live stream filled the comment section with assumptions. Some mocked her, others defended her. Many questioned why she had entered a competition dominated by elite military marksmen. No one watching from home knew the sacrifices that had shaped the quiet woman. Standing at lane 7, no one knew the years she had spent, carrying responsibilities that could never be discussed publicly. No one knew why she valued silence more than recognition. What they saw was a black woman standing alone against impossible odds. What they couldn't see was the strength built through years of discipline, sacrifice, and service qualities shared by countless honorable military members and law enforcement officers who protect others without asking for attention. As the range safety officer prepared to call every shooter into position, conversations gradually faded. The morning sun climbed higher above the California sky. The steel targets shimmered in the distance. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the firing line. For most competitors, this championship was about trophies, rankings, and reputation for the quiet woman in Lane 7. It meant something far more personal, something worth every mile she had traveled and every silent sacrifice she had carried long before anyone on this range ever learned her name. The loudspeaker crackled across the range. "Relay 1, take your positions." Conversations disappeared almost instantly. The laughter that had filled the registration area only minutes earlier gave way to disciplined silence as competitors walked toward their assigned lanes. Boots crunched against the gravel. Range officers performed final safety checks, while police officers assigned to event security guided spectators. Behind the protective barriers, Captain Daniel Brooks of the Los Angeles Police Department quietly watched every movement from the observation line. His years in law enforcement had taught him that moments before action often revealed more about a person than the action itself. The woman at Lane 7 never hurried. She carried her rifle with steady hands, placed the bipod into the dirt, and carefully adjusted the rifle until it rested naturally against her shoulder. No unnecessary movement, no dramatic gestures. No attempt to impress anyone watching, only discipline across the firing line. Expensive rifles rested on custom shooting mats worth thousands of dollars. Precision weather stations blinked beside elite competitors. Spotters whispered calculations through electronic headsets, while assistants adjusted tripods and range cards. Lane 7 looked different. She worked alone. No coach, no assistant. No spotter. Just quiet preparation. Rear Admiral James Crawford observed through binoculars. From the elevated platform, he smiled confidently. "This won't take long," he muttered. The range officer raised his hand. Competitors load one magazine. Metallic clicks echoed together as bolts slid forward. The sound carried through the valley like a perfectly rehearsed orchestra. Stand by, every heartbeat seemed louder. Every eye focused on the steel silhouettes nearly 600 yards away. A green light flashed fire. The first relay erupted. Powerful rifle reports rolled across the California range. Steel targets rang one after another. Spotters shouted wind corrections. "Half-minute left, come right. 2 clicks, good hit." The spectators applauded after every clean impact. One after another, elite competitors completed impressive performances worthy of national recognition. The electronic scoreboard updated continuously. 92, 24 to 96. Outstanding scores. Exactly what everyone expected from America's finest marksman. Crawford nodded with satisfaction. "This is professional shooting." The first relay ended. Applause echoed through the stands. The range officer called the next group. "Relay 2, move into position." The woman quietly lifted her rifle. Without looking left or right, she walked toward Lane 7. Several competitors exchanged amused smiles. One former Marine whispered to his teammate, "This should be interesting." Another shook his head. "Poor woman." Captain Brooks remained silent. His eyes never left her. She settled behind the rifle exactly as before. Deep breath, slow exhale. Natural point of aim. She closed her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. Everything around her seemed to disappear. The crowd, the cameras, the whispers, the insults. Even Crawford's voice. Only the target existed now. The range officer called out once more. Stand by. A single second stretched endlessly. Fire. Her first shot broke the silence. Ping. The steel target answered immediately. A perfect center. Hit the electronic scoreboard. Flashed 10. Several spectators nodded politely. A good opening shot, nothing more. She cycled the bolt without lifting her head. Second shot. Ping. Another center hit 10. The crowd grew quieter. Third shot. Ping. Center 10. Captain Brooks slowly uncrossed his arms. The deputy beside him leaned forward. "That's Brooks," finished the sentence. Professional fourth shot. Ping. Center 10. Now even the competitors waiting behind the line stopped talking. Phones that had been recording casually were suddenly held steady. Television cameras zoomed tighter. The fifth shot came almost immediately. Ping. Center 10. Perfect score. The scoreboard illuminated beside Lane 7. 50 out of 50. The range became strangely quiet. No cheering, no laughter. Only disbelief. One Navy competitor stared at the scoreboard before looking back through his spotting scope. I thought the system glitched. A range official checked the electronic target. Everything was accurate. Captain Brooks smiled to himself. I knew it, the deputy looked at him. You expected that, no? Brooks answered honestly. I expected discipline. The woman calmly cleared her rifle. Safety on, bolt open. Magazine removed, she stood, brushed a little dust from her jeans, and quietly walked away from the firing line, exactly as if she had completed another ordinary day at work. She never looked toward the scoreboard. She never acknowledged the cameras following her. She simply returned to her folding chair beneath a small shade tent and opened a bottle of water. Across the range, conversations exploded. Who is she? Where did she train? Did anyone check her service history? I've never seen shooting that smooth. A county sheriff attending as a guest instructor shook his head. The scary part wasn't the accuracy. His fellow instructor looked puzzled. What was it, the control? Several experienced officers nearby quietly agreed. Great shooters could hit targets. Exceptional professionals controlled themselves first. From the observation platform, Admiral Crawford lowered his binoculars. His smile had disappeared. Lieutenant Harper stepped beside him, holding the scoring tablet. Lane 7 posted a perfect 50. I can read. Harper hesitated. It was also the fastest clean relay this morning. Crawford looked back toward the woman sitting alone beneath the shade. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't calling anyone. She wasn't even watching the scoreboard. She simply drank her water while quietly cleaning a small speck of dust from her rifle. Something about that unsettled him. He had expected excitement. Instead, he saw complete emotional control. His voice hardened luck. Harper remained respectful with respect. Admiral, 5 consecutive center impacts at this distance usually aren't luck. Crawford ignored him. Prepare round 2. The standard 600-yard precision stage, sir. Crawford stared toward lane 7. No, Harper frowned. The competition handbook was published months ago. I know exactly what the handbook says. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Increase the distance, sir. Add stronger environmental variables. Harper looked surprised. That affects every competitor. It especially affects someone competing alone. The lieutenant remained silent for several seconds before speaking. Carefully, sir. Some teams may file protests. Crawford's eyes never left the woman quietly sitting by herself. Let them down on the range. Captain Brooks noticed officials gathering around the scoring station. Years of police leadership had taught him how to recognize private conversations that carried public consequences. Something had changed. The deputy beside him followed his gaze. You think they're discussing her? Brooks nodded slowly. When excellence surprises people who rely on assumptions. He paused. The rules often become more interesting. Meanwhile, the woman quietly finished her bottle of water, folded the empty plastic, neatly placed it inside her range bag, and picked up a small notebook. Instead of celebrating her perfect performance, she calmly began writing observations about distance, lighting conditions, and target behavior, preparing herself for whatever challenge came next, without knowing that powerful people behind the scenes were already searching for a way to stop her before the next relay ever began. A low murmur swept across the firing range as officials gathered around the electronic scoring station. Competitors who had spent years earning medals now found themselves talking about only one name, the quiet black woman standing alone at lane 7. No one had expected perfection, least of all Rear Admiral James Crawford. His expression remained fixed as he watched officials verify every shot on the electronic target system. For a second time, no errors. One technician reported, the impacts are exactly where the system recorded them. Another official adjusted his headset before nodding. Everything checks out, Admiral. For several long seconds, Crawford said nothing. Then he slowly looked across the range toward Tara. She sat alone beneath the shade tent, carefully wiping dust from her rifle with an old cleaning cloth. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't watching the scoreboard. She wasn't answering reporters who had begun gathering nearby. She looked like someone preparing for another ordinary day. Instead of becoming the biggest story at the championship, that unsettled him more than the perfect score itself. People who surprised you usually celebrated. People who expected excellence simply prepared for the next challenge. Lieutenant Harper stood beside Crawford, holding the official competition binder. So round 2 begins in 45 minutes. Crawford finally spoke. Change it. Harper looked confused, sir. The published distance is 800 yards. It isn't anymore, Harper hesitated. The competitors have trained for months using the official course. Crawford's voice became colder. I said change it. Nearby officials exchanged uncertain looks. Changing championship conditions after the event had already begun was almost unheard of. Increase the distance to 1,000 yards. Harper blinked. 1,000. And introduce crosswind simulation. One of the civilian coordinators stepped forward. Admiral, that affects every competitor equally. Crawford's eyes narrowed. Then the best shooters should have nothing to complain about. The coordinator wisely stepped back. Within minutes, electronic display boards across the range flashed. Updated instructions round 2. Distance revised 1,000 yards. Variable crosswind conditions. Confused voices immediately filled the spectator area. What happened? They changed the course. Can they even do that? Television commentators quickly began discussing the unusual decision. Some defended Crawford's authority. Others questioned the fairness of altering published competition standards. Captain Daniel Brooks quietly folded his arms. The deputy standing beside him looked concerned. Isn't that unusual? Brooks answered without hesitation. It is. You think it's because of her. Brooks watched the woman sitting alone beneath the tent. I think excellence makes insecure people uncomfortable. Several law enforcement officers from different departments quietly agreed. Professional policing demanded fairness, whether writing a report, making an arrest, or supervising a competition. Changing standards after seeing who succeeds damaged trust more than losing ever could. Across the range, Tara calmly finished cleaning her rifle. A volunteer range officer approached, carrying the revised course sheet. Ma'am, they've updated round 2. She accepted the paper. Thank you. The officer waited. He expected surprise. Maybe frustration instead. She simply read every line carefully before folding the paper and placing it inside her notebook. No questions, he asked. She offered a polite smile. The target is still made of steel. The officer couldn't help smiling. Yes, ma'am. Then the job hasn't changed. As he walked away, he quietly shook his head. Some people carried confidence like noise. Others carried it like discipline. Meanwhile, another competitor approached her. Marine Gunnery Sergeant Michael Callahan had spent nearly 50 years competing in military marksmanship championships. He extended his hand. You embarrassed the rest of us this morning. Tara accepted the handshake. I'm sure everyone shot well. Callahan laughed. That's exactly why you embarrassed us. He looked toward the updated scoreboard. You know, this rule change isn't normal. I noticed you planning to protest. She slowly closed her notebook. No, you don't think it's unfair. She looked toward the distant targets, shimmering beneath the California sun. Life doesn't promise equal conditions. Callahan studied her for a moment. There was no bitterness in her voice, only experience, real experience. The kind impossible to fake. He nodded respectfully. I hope we end up on the same relay. So do I. Before walking away, he quietly added, good luck. Master Sergeant. For the first time that morning, someone addressed her rank without mockery. It was a simple gesture, but respect often begins with simple choices. Nearby, several younger competitors noticed the conversation. One whispered, Callahan never compliments anyone. Another answered, maybe we judged her too quickly. Captain Brooks overheard the exchange. He smiled. Respect earned through performance always lasted longer than respect demanded through words. The atmosphere across the championship slowly changed. Earlier that morning, cameras had followed Tara because she was different. Now they followed her because she was becoming the favorite. News reporters adjusted their broadcasts. The mystery competitor continues to dominate conversations. Here at Coronado, the only solo shooter remaining among the top performers. Officials confirm her first-round score remains unmatched. Online, millions of viewers continued debating her identity. Former military personnel posted comments praising her composure. Police officers from departments across the country shared clips highlighting her professionalism under pressure. Veterans reminded viewers that true service members often spoke least about their accomplishments. Inside the official's operations trailer, Crawford stared at the digital rankings. Lane 7 first place. Perfect score. He clenched his jaw. This isn't over. Lieutenant Harper quietly entered. Carrying a personal request form, sir. I tried accessing her military history, and the system returned restricted access. Crawford looked up immediately. Restricted. Yes, sir. No awards listed, no assignments listed. No deployment history available. Only confirmation that she retired honorably as a master sergeant. Harper lowered his voice. I've never seen a record like it. Crawford took the tablet himself and attempted another search. The screen displayed the same message. Access denied, authorized personnel only. For the first time all day, uncertainty crossed the Admiral's face. Military records rarely disappeared without reason. Years of distinguished service remained visible even after retirement. Training schools, decorations, assignments. Commendations. Something should have been there. Instead, nothing. It was as though someone had deliberately erased every chapter of her career while leaving only her name behind. Outside, the afternoon sun settled over the range. As competitors prepared for the revised course, Tara quietly checked the elevation turret on her scope before closing the bolt with calm precision. Around her, shooters recalculated wind charts, adjusted ballistic computers, and hurried to rewrite their firing solutions. After the unexpected rule changes, she simply looked downrange for several silent moments, studying the distant steel target as if it were telling her something everyone else had missed. While far beyond the competition grounds, a secure military database had just logged another failed attempt to unlock the classified history of the quiet black woman. Everyone thought they had already figured out. The announcement echoed across the championship range. Round 2, competitors report to your assigned lanes. Conversations immediately faded as competitors gathered their rifles and equipment. The atmosphere felt different now. Earlier that morning, most eyes had followed Tara Wells out of curiosity. Now they followed her because she had become the shooter. Every favorite secretly hoped to avoid. Reporters moved closer to lane 7. Camera operators adjusted long lenses toward her position. Even the spectators who had laughed during registration now watched in complete silence. Tara walked toward the firing line, carrying the same weathered rifle case she had carried since sunrise. Nothing about her appearance had changed. No confident speeches, no celebration, no dramatic entrance, just steady footsteps and quiet focus. Captain Daniel Brooks stood beside several law enforcement instructors, invited to observe the championship. A sheriff from Arizona quietly leaned toward him. She doesn't look nervous. Brooks smiled. The people who have already survived the hardest days of their lives usually aren't afraid of difficult mornings. Across the range, Rear Admiral James Crawford climbed onto the observation platform. Holding a microphone, ladies and gentlemen, he announced confidently, the revised course will separate experience from luck. His words carried across the entire facility. 1,000-yard precision engagement. Variable crosswinds, 5 scoring shots. He paused just long enough for everyone to understand who the message was really directed toward. This round leaves no room for miracles. Several competitors nodded. At 1,000 yards, even the smallest mistake could move a bullet. Several inches away from center, electronic wind indicators blinked across the range. Flags mounted along the firing line shifted constantly in different directions. The conditions had become far more demanding than those originally published. Every shooter began recalculating ballistic charts. Spotters whispered updated wind corrections. Coaches revised firing notes. One last time, only Tara remained alone. She knelt beside her rifle, tied a short piece of thread near the front sling swivel, and quietly watched it move with the changing breeze. One young deputy standing nearby looked confused. Why isn't she using a digital wind meter? Captain Brooks answered before anyone else could, because sometimes experience reads nature better than electronics. The deputy watched the small thread dancing gently in the wind. It looked almost too simple, yet Teresa studied it with complete attention. Every slight movement meant something. Every shift carried information. Across the platform, Crawford noticed the thread and laughed into the microphone. Looks like someone's improvising. Several spectators chuckled politely. Tara never looked up. The range officer raised his arm. Competitors' loud metallic clicks echoed across the firing line. Standby silence settled. Once again, fire. The first relay began. Rifles thundered one after another. Steel echoed across the valley. Wind challenged every bullet. One experienced Marine drifted into the outer ring. A Navy competitor missed center twice. Even elite marksmen struggled to keep tight groups. Under the revised conditions, The electronic scoreboard reflected the difficulty, 81, 79, 84. Excellent shooting, but not perfection. Soon the range officer called Lane 7. Tara settled naturally behind her rifle. Captain Brooks noticed something immediately. Her breathing slowed until it almost disappeared. Her heartbeat never seemed to rush. She looked completely disconnected from the noise surrounding her. The cameras, the crowd, the Admiral, none of it existed anymore. Only the target, only the process. She squeezed the trigger. Ping center hit. The scoreboard flashed 20 points. No reaction. She chambered another round. The wind shifted slightly. The thread moved. She waited, not because she doubted herself, because patience was part of precision. The second shot broke ping center again. Several competitors watching through spotting scopes quietly lowered their binoculars. One whispered. She waited exactly 2 seconds for that wind change. Another answered, "Nobody gets that lucky." Twice the third shot followed. Another clean center hit the camera. Is immediately focused on Crawford. His confident smile had begun to disappear. Lieutenant Harper quietly checked the electronic target feed again. "No malfunction, sir." Crawford didn't answer. The fourth shot came after another brief pause. Ping center. The crowd remained silent, not because they lacked excitement, because they had begun witnessing something that demanded respect. Instead of applause, Captain Brooks folded his arms again. Watch her follow through. The deputy looked through borrowed binoculars. What about it she isn't watching to see whether she hit? Why? Because she already knows. Tara calmly cycled the bolt for her final round. The wind increased for several seconds before suddenly calming. She never rushed. She simply waited. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger. The thread settled. She fired. Ping dead center. The electronic scoreboard updated. Perfect score again for several seconds. Absolute silence covered the range. Then scattered applause began from the back rows. It quickly spread throughout the grandstands. Not loud, not wild. Respectful competitors who had spent years chasing championships quietly nodded toward Lane 7. Marine Gunnery Sergeant Michael Callahan removed his shooting glasses and shook his head. "I've competed for 15 years. Another Marine looked over. "You ever seen anything like that?" Callahan answered honestly. "Not once." Across the observation platform, Crawford gripped the railing tightly. His plan had failed the longer distance. The unpredictable wind, the revised rules. None of it had stopped her. Instead, she looked even stronger than before. Lieutenant Harper quietly approached. "Sir, media representatives are requesting an interview with Master Sergeant Wells." Crawford's expression hardened. "They can wait. They're saying she's become the story of the championship." His jaw tightened. "This championship has one story." Harper wisely remained silent. Below the platform, reporters hurried toward Tara. Microphones extended in every direction. "Master Sergeant, how did you read the wind so accurately? Were you military sniper qualified? Who trained you?" Tara simply secured her rifle before answering politely. "The instructors who taught me believed preparation matters more than attention. Can you tell us where you served?" She smiled gently. "I served with honor." Any specific units? She respectfully declined. "I don't discuss my military history." The reporters looked disappointed, but Captain Brooks quietly smiled. Real professionals rarely introduce themselves with stories. Their work spoke first. Their words came later, as officials prepared the rankings for the next elimination round. Another unsuccessful request to access terrorist-sealed military file flashed across a secure Department of Defense server hundreds of miles away, automatically triggering an encrypted security notification that landed on the desk of someone who immediately recognized the name Master Sergeant Tara Wells and understood that what was unfolding at Coronado had just become far bigger than a marksmanship competition. The applause followed Tara all the way to the parking area, but she never turned around to acknowledge it. She simply carried her rifle case the same way she had carried it that morning, with quiet purpose and complete humility. Captain Brooks watched her leave and realized true leadership was never about being the loudest person in the room. It was about leaving people better than you found them. Before climbing into her truck, Tara looked back one last time. She saw police officers, deputies, military veterans, and young cadets standing together. For a brief moment, there were no branches, no ranks, no titles. Only Americans united by respect for courage and character. That was the victory no trophy could ever represent. Captain Brooks removed his badge for a moment, looked at it in his hand and smiled. "The badge means nothing," he quietly said to the young deputy beside him, "unless the person wearing it remembers why they earned it." The deputy nodded, knowing he had witnessed something he would remember for the rest of his career. As Tara drove away beneath the golden California sunset, she wasn't thinking about the championship or the applause. She was thinking about going home, seeing her mother and living the peaceful life she had always wanted. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't chase recognition. They simply answer the call when duty asks, then quietly return to the people they love. Long after the crowd had gone home, people would remember the lesson more than the competition itself. Never judge a person by appearance, race, gender, or silence. Respect is earned through integrity, courage, humility, and the willingness to stand for others when it matters most. Great police officers and great soldiers share the same mission: to protect, to serve, and to lead with honor. Now we'd love to hear from you. What part of Terry's journey touched you the most? Have you ever been underestimated and later proved someone wrong? Share your experience in the comments, because your story could inspire someone else today. If you enjoyed this story, tell us what you'd like to watch next. Should our next video feature another fearless black woman, an inspiring military hero, or an unforgettable justice story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing community, where every story reminds us that true strength is measured by character, not by the assumptions of others.